I don't remember any other things too much around that. Okay, so but then I'm going like, but being in school during this period, starting school during this period, learning. When you're in school with Saturn below the horizon, it's the most natural time to be studying and learning. It's a perfect place. You're not having to be responsible. You have to learn, play, study. So from 10, it wasn't until it was until 9 years later, 9 to 10 years later, that Saturn went over my descendant. And this time I'm 64, so I'm 18 to 19 here. Okay, so just before my graduation in high school, I found my girlfriend, a week before the graduation, I found my girlfriend in the arms of my best friend. So my best friend for whole high school. So it's the end of my friend, end of my girlfriend. I got another date with an older girl and you went to the grad, but it was a really traumatic thing that affected my relationships or my trusting of people. And then we didn't have money to go to university. My parents were too poor. And they were in the process of splitting up. My parents were splitting up. They were splitting up this time on the descendant too. So my relationship got wrecked. My parents were splitting up. But I managed to get a scholarship from a Rotary scholarship that paid for me to go to university. So I got into the university as the first one in our family that got to university. So I was really proud of that. Got to university, and I got into university, but I was taking chemistry, math, and science, but really I became really interested in poetry. Well, partly from difficulties in relationships or sadness, I started writing poetry. But this was a really change in my function of writing about things that were happening to me. But it really was a shift in my starting to see where I fit in the world, where I function. First girlfriend. But even with my girlfriends, I never brought them to my place. My parents were splitting up. I never had any example of how to be in a relationship. That's my problem. Okay. 3 divorces later, I see it much more clearly. It took me to 72 years to begin to see that. Anyways, that was the descendant. But then, from then, it was we moved. I went to university, and I started writing poetry. But the second year, I left university to travel to write poetry. I became a hippie. My parents split up. I moved to travel for a few years, ended up going to India, and spent a few years in India. Had some mystical experiences. Came back. By the time Saturn was in the midheaven, I'd already got inspired about astrology from India, and I ran across. I had my first chart done a year or so after that, and I realized, wow, you mean I'm supposed to be like this? I got so interested, I got excited with it. So I was studying everything I possibly got. When Saturn got on my midheaven, 71, I'd been studying this for a year and a bit, really intensely, like hours and hours every day on my own. But I had a feeling I had to make a formal statement of it. So when Saturn was exactly on my midheaven, to the minute of the degree, I went and registered myself as an astrology business. And then I was married at that time, and then that was my symbol of responsibility, becoming an official astrologer. But I had been for doing charts for a few years, then for a year or two. Then we moved to the country. I got a place in the country. I was doing herbs and selling herbs and being into and teas and stuff like that. But at the end of that period, we moved from there to another place, and then that one farm to another farm because I didn't make enough money. And at the end of that, I spent a winter there, but I had to take all my teeth out. They were not good, so I had all my teeth out. The day I came out of the operation, my wife came to get me, and she's with her lover. So I found out my ego wasn't best having my teeth out, and that same day my wife was with her lover, and we split up. That next week she found out. About a couple weeks later, she found out she's pregnant. So there's a whole lot of what's real, what's responsible. I set up the responsibility, but what's holding together? My relationships weren't really that together. They were not together at all. But that was a point of status. I had the business, I had the work to do, which I never really had before. And but I was very status motivation, but my personal life got damaged to that point. That's just my Saturn in the midheaven. When Saturn's on my midheaven, it opposes my Venus and my IC. So I get the ups and the downs at the same time. But then I built up my business. I set up a bookstore. I set up a library. I built up this whole library thing, got involved with organizations. I set things up. So I built it up quite strongly. But in the end, I sold the bookstore to someone who ripped me off and never paid me, and ordered all sorts of books under my name and the name of the bookstore with the publishers. And then I had to go through a lawsuit to clear my name that I wasn't responsible for this. And so I lost the bookstore. But when I lost the bookstore, it was also ended a relationship. Marriage ended before that. Another relationship, it ended then. But I lost the bookstore. I not only lost all the books in the store, because I told him this guy, he never paid me, so I lost the books. I lost about 25 grand worth of books. But someone had lent me the money to get the books, so I owed 25,000. I lost 25,000. I still owed 25,000 with no more equity to pay it off. So I had to make I had to make a deal with this person, and she was very good. She had fun of me, so I made a deal. So instead of her me paying the bank, she paid the loan off, and I paid her so much a month for the next 7 years, or next 5 or 6 years to pay this off, without interest and stuff. That was a good deal, but it was still my identity was done. The relationship then, the bookstore then, everything I set up was, so my whole functional attitude in the world had changed. And then I had to go through this personal growth phase. So then I really did a lot of, I'm teaching astrology during this whole time, but I really did a lot more personal research, personal study during this whole period. And the same period between 7 and 8, I'm teaching, I'm doing astrology, but I had other relationships coming in. I was studying, I was really reading everything in astrology I could possibly read at the time, and teaching. At the IC, a relationship, I began a new relationship. This was the beginning of my third marriage. Beginning of I lived for 2 or 3 years before we got married. So this was the beginning, but I was deeply motivated. I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to do anything. So I started the relationship. I was living in the studio. Went along. So, okay, that was the IC. So it was a lot of personal growth. What are we doing for time? Okay, so that was a deeply motivating time, because I had lost my motivation from the ascendant. When I lost the bookstore and everything, I had the scandal, that I had to pay off the debt. By the time I hit the IC, I paid off the debt. I'd gotten free. I did something, I accomplished something. I never thought I would ever be able to pay it back. But that having to pay it back kept me working in astrology more. That it centered me and grounded me as a job during that personal growth phase. Sometimes someone will level off in a job with Saturn. They level off. They have their position. They're not going to get promotions. They level off. They stay in that position, but it pays for their studying to learn other things on the side. For me, I made the deal to solve this, to free my name. But Saturn on the ascendant, I got the legal things settled. Then I still had scandals and other things. I had to work to pay off debts and rebuild. That was all my personal rebuilding, my depth and my understanding with astrology, and continually going on with it. At the IC, the debts had been paid off, and I didn't have the backlog, and I was able to start being motivated to build up again. And interesting thing, along this line, building up the astrology, I had teaching, I was living in a studio, I had a class there. But along this way, in this growth and capacity, I had built up a library before I gave it away to start a school, a spiritual university. It fell apart for 5 years. I'd given it away. Then I decided I'd take it back. I went and saw it after 5 years, and they messed it up, so I took it back and they ruined it. I took it back. So along this growth and capacity, I added the library to it. But in adding the library to it, it really made me make extra commitments to the library, to my skills and building up. But it really was, my wife wasn't ready for that, and it was the beginning of the end of the relationship, which was gone by the next. By the time, but I had the library, the school, I'd become parts of different organizations. By the time Saturn hit the descendant, I joined other organizations. I was one of the founding members of AFAN, the Association for Astrological Networking in the States. It broke away from the AFA and started the whole networking organization. I'm one of the founding members, and I became a steering committee member. There were 12 steering committee members that ran it. I was in charge of education. And so I was in that position. I also became president of the NCGR. I started in Toronto chapter as the NCGR. I was the editor of the AFAN guide. Astrologer's Guide, and I was the editor for News by Degrees of the NCR chapter. So it's really the beginning of being involved with other people in a functional way within the astrology community, and really building up my career in a lot bigger way than when I first came from my visions and came up and just started in my own. So by the time I got up to the midheaven, midheaven's 2000, I had built up these groups, but after a few years they weren't working and they were American groups. So I'm still a member of the steering committee of the EFAN, but I let go of the steering committee position and I let go of the NCR chapter ended. But I was still teaching. I had my school, and I worked for Simpatico, and I built up my website by the time it set up to the midheaven. When I got to the midheaven, I had the website built up. I had built it up, so I had a website, 2,500 web pages on one site. It was an incredible site. I had everything I wanted was on it. It was all set up. And then, oh no, that's not that point. That's later. Okay, so this was, I got a job with Simpatico, and I was this whole period up to midheaven, I was Simpatico's astrologer, and they went out to millions of people. It built up really well. And then after a few years, they ended the contract, but they ripped me off at the end of the contract. So the end of the contract, they kept my name. I didn't mind the end of the contract, but during it was on there, they put my name, on search engines. They had if you typed Robin Armstrong, they would have Robin Armstrong Simpatico astrologer. If they had astrology, Robin Armstrong. If they had any psychics, Robin Armstrong Simpatico's astrologer. Mysticism, they had 1,000 different categories of names that they put my name with to Simpatico's astrology. So I really had the status really big at that point. But then when they ended the contract, I just, they let it go. That was fine. But they started another business in the States. This is Bell Canada. They set up another business in the States to do astrology. And they took all my clients and all the references that were supposed to come to me from the site, went to their site and went to the States. And I lost half my income, or I lost the contract and half my income for the next 5 or 6 years. If you typed Robin Armstrong and then we're search engine, the first 200 pages, first 100 or so pages anyways, would have been Robin Armstrong Simpatico's astrologer before you got to one of mine. So, but that all happened up building up the midheaven. And then once that happened, I built up my own. It took about 6 months to a year. I built up my own website to counter theirs. And I built up a nice one for them, but I built up a better one for myself, and they became jealous of it. And